I will present novel linker branching approach to the solid phase peptide synthesis. I am Associate Director of Innovation in Polypeptide Group. I'm located in Torrance, California, USA. So, a little bit about Polypeptide Group. Polypeptide has been in peptide business for over combined experience of over 70 years. We have 6 sites, 2 in US, 3 in Europe, and 1 in India. And we do development as well as GMP manufacturing. So today, I will be talking about 3 things. One is a newly developed branch linker. And this is an enabling piece where we could generate a greater amount of a peptide per polystyrene beads. And I will also present some data about how volumetric optimization can be achieved. In other words, per given amount of the reactor space, how we can improve peptide output. And last, I'm going to talk about the quality of the peptide. So, a little bit about a couple of introduction slides. Why we need to improve solid phase peptide synthesis? Because synthetic peptides generate significantly high amount of PMI. In other words, the solvent and reagents that goes into solid phase peptide synthesis is significantly higher than small molecule counterpart. And there are, many of you may already know, significant demand in peptide molecule, synthetic peptide molecule in diabetes and obesity space. And the patient population in that area is also increasing. So there are a couple of ways to do this. We can increase the peptide production capacity by building a bigger reactor. But there is a downside to that because oftentimes building a bigger reactor is costly, they're expensive. And bigger reactor may not always be the most efficient reactor. So increasing the volumetric capacity, meaning that we get more peptide from smaller volume, will be a topic of this talk. So there are several key criteria we want to consider before we approach this topic. So one is that we need to, whatever linker construct we build, it has to deliver high quality peptide. Because a lot of these peptide molecules are API, so quality cannot be sacrificed. So it has to accommodate short peptide, long peptide, or complicated conjugated peptide, and gotta maintain high quality. Capacity. So solid phase, since it has a high PMI, we want to maximize the capacity of the solid support. And that is to say that we need to increase the binding site in a way that it translates to the peptide. So that means we cannot simply use the high substitution resin, where when you start building a peptide, when you go far enough, you start to degrade the quality. And swelling factor, this could be sometimes a little tricky one because a lot of times resin vendors, they advertise our resin has a high swelling factor, and they are right. In general, resin swells better. It will give you better quality peptide. But the other side of that is resin swelling factor is too high, then it takes up a lot of room in the reactor. So reactor occupancy is greater. That translates to, again, bigger reactor and higher solvent consumption. And of course, the chemistry has to be compatible with existing the FMOC chemistry. So the desired criteria here is that we want the high number of binding site per bead and overall lower swelling, so you could generate more peptide from given volume and accommodate long and complicated peptide. So now a little bit about background slide here. Just want to test the pointer. It is so on your left-hand side, the traditional low substitution resin, you have a lower number of peptide chain growing from the resin. As you increase the substitution beyond certain point, you do not get high quality peptide because the peptide chains run into each other, they aggregate. So branching concept is based on this. We introduced the spacers and then branching agent in such a way that we start growing this peptide in a little bit ordered state rather than congested state. So when we do this, we have to consider a bit about the microenvironment so that we give enough spacings between these peptide chains that are growing, indicated by this green smaller dot. Those are growing peptides. So this is just the basic scheme of how branching is done. So core matrix is a polystyrene resin, and you immediately after that is a spacer. We have several different types of a spacer, followed by branching agent. So you branch this out once, we call this generation 1. You expand that original binding site on resin to 2 times. Now you go one more generation, you expand it to 4 times. Generation 3, 8 times. So binding site has been amplified multiple times. And on top of this binding site, you would attach the linker, such as FMOC ring, FMOC ramage, this type of a linker, where first amino acid will attach to. So those are the general picture. So I'm going to now show you the case study. Does it work? So this is the basically business part of the presentation. So I'm going to show you the short peptide and also the long peptide. But first, let's look at the binding site translation. So previous slide, you saw the general configuration of original polystyrene binding site being branched out and amplified. So we want to see that is actually happening. So this is basically the 1x on your left-hand side. Basically tells you this is the polystyrene base resin. So in the orange is the theoretical binding site. Blue is the actual. So and the 1x is basically our standard control. Now you branch out 2 times the first generation, 2x. It follows through expected theoretical binding site. It's slightly lower, but not too far. Second generation branching, now you amplify the binding site 4 times, and it still follows through. By the time it reaches the third generation, 8-fold increase, you are lower than expected value. So in this configuration, we probably don't want to push it to 8 times. We want to stay around 4 times with this given resin and this given branching agent. Now let's look at after what happens. You put the F-mark ring. This is the linker where first amino acid binds. So we need to put this linker because we have to detach our product after synthesis. So the pattern closely resembles previous graph that you just have seen. So that the linker, the anchor molecule F-mark ring is successfully going onto the branching site. And if you look at the first generation 2x and second generation 4x, it almost superimposes. By the time you reach the third generation 8x, it is lower, and that's expected because you saw the branching agent was also lower. So, so binding site increase was successfully achieved, and anchor molecule is successfully coupled. So we're gonna build a short peptide, and this is sequences taken from the extended for 25 to 39. So this is a 15 mer peptide, 15 amino acid long, with the substitution of the K27 to N28. So 2 amino acid was replaced. So with this, after you build a peptide, we're going to measure the peptide resin weight gain. And we want to see it has gained the expected weight. If the peptide is growing, the peptide resin will gain weight, and we want to see if the weight gain follows expected value. And it does. If you look at the control 1x and the first generation 2x, second generation 4x, it follows through. And you have seen before in previous slide, third generation 8x was stalling out. And that's exactly what this weight gain is reflecting. Now you look at the crude peptide. So you're gonna take the peptide resin on your left-hand side, you cleave this, and then you look at the weight of this crude peptide. Again, the result is consistent with the peptide resin weight gain. So now let's look at what kind of a quality. When we expand and build a peptide on this branch construct, are we going to have a lower quality peptide, lower purity? And if you look at the graph on the black, that's a control 1x. And the expected purity, that's reasonable purity, what you expect from a normal synthesis of the 15 amino acid long peptide. And the first generation branch construct, which is indicated by 2x in blue, you do not see much degradation. I will look at this and say, this is more or less the same. And then the second generation branching, indicated by red 4x, and you also do not see degradation in purity. And then the third generation, indicated by 8x in brown, you do see front impurity popping up, and then there's a little hump in the rear. And this is somewhat expected because in the previous binding site data you have seen, the reaction was stalling out. Also, the weight gain indicated in previous graph, you have seen that it wasn't going. So this is one of the key slides. So what does this mean? Why do we have to do this? Now I'm going to look at peptide yield per unit volume of the reactor. What this is telling you is compared to the 1x, if you branch out to 2x, you're getting more peptide for given unit volume of the reactor. And you branch out even further to 4x, you're gonna get even more. So the significance of this is that for this peptide, you have, let's say, 100-liter reactor. It can compete with 200 or 300-liter reactor. If you have a 1,000-liter reactor, it can compete with 2,000 or 3,000-liter reactor. That's what this slide is suggesting. So binding site translation in the previous 15 more peptide, 4-fold increase. Second generation is favorable. Quality of branch synthesis is essentially the same as control peptide, which is a normal 1X synthesis. And the most significantly, reactor occupancy or using this high density synthesis is significantly greater than normal traditional synthesis. So I'm going to show you a longer peptide as another case study. Sometimes a shorter peptide is much easier to build than 39 more longer peptide. So what is this? The model peptide is basically, I'm not showing entire sequence, but this sequence is the internally designed sequence. It does not belong to any real drug product, but it is the 39 amino acid in length, and it has a side chain built into it. So molecular weight is 4704, which is in range of the many incretin peptide out in the market. So let's look at performance of this. So this one on the, I wish I had it's kind of like trying to see the pointer. But if you look at the gray, that's the standard 1X peptide compared with the 4X branch synthesis on the blue. So peptide resin content is exactly the same for both. And as you can see, the peptide resin weight gain for the branch peptide increased 16-fold. For the normal synthesis, it has increased about 7-fold. And that's pretty much normal. For those of you who have done many peptide synthesis, you will see the peptide resin weight gain ranges between about 2 to 6 or 7-ish, right? About 2-fold increase for shorter peptide, and about 5 to 7-fold increase for longer peptide. That's normal. But in this case, what you are seeing is a 16-fold increase in weight gain. Now I want to compare this with polystyrene. So this second graph, the smaller bar on your left-hand side is a polystyrene content. For both syntheses, we are measuring against the same polystyrene content. And then on your right-hand side is actually purified API. And as you can see, purified API is significantly more. So now let's look at a volumetric side. Let's consider the reactor occupancy side of this synthesis. So this is the standardized to 1 liter reactor volume space and how much purified API we are getting out. And on your left-hand side in gray is a normal synthesis. On your right-hand side in blue is the purified peptide coming from branch synthesis is actually significantly more. In several syntheses we have done, you could claim this to as at least a 2-fold increase, considering the volumetric side of the reactor. So this illustrates another one. So constant volume model means that, I'm not sure you can clearly see, but you do see on your left-hand side, there is a solution and the resin kind of settled. All 3 resin has the same volume. So reactor occupancy in this case for 1X, 2X, and 4X are all the same. But when you cleave it, the peptide coming out of that, you can see 4X is significantly more than control 1X. So this is what I was talking about, the volumetric size. From the given reactor size, all 3 in this case would have the same reactor size. You just get more peptide as you branch. So let's look at the crude quality. So when you branch it out, are we really degrading the quality of crude? So upper side on your left is a normal synthesis, and the lower side is the branch synthesis. And to me, that looks very, very similar. So let's look at this after purification. So you push this through reverse phase purification, you do get the clean peptide. So this is absolutely a purified crude that you can purify and reach high purity. And if you look at the TIC above, and then you look at the, you don't see any peak hiding underneath the main peak. It's relatively clean. So the peptide has been made with the correct mass, and they're clean, and you can purify this. So 39 more peptide with the proper selection of the spacers and branching agent, you could reach 39 more peptide with the side chain. And the crude quality is comparable to the normal synthesis. And the reactor occupancy is twice smaller, or you could say peptide output is twice greater than normal. So in summary, I think I've said many of this, but the resin saving can be very significant because most of the branch binding site is translatable. That means you can save the resin at least four times. Quality is generally not diminished. You could achieve excellent quality. And this is one of the polypeptide innovation is a green part of green chemistry program. And this is our team. I'm located in Torrance, USA, and those are the people who have contributed to this effort. And we have a main site in Strasbourg led by Olivier.